Good evening, noon, face tube. No, that's not right. You'd think after who knows how many live shows I'd get it right. All jokes aside, what's going on, internet? Welcome back to another episode of Spirited by the Whiskey Somm. My name is Sam Nash Green. I am the Whiskey Somm, and we are talking about one of my absolute favorite Campbellton Scotch whiskeys today, Glen Scotia. This is actually part one of a two-part series I'm doing with Mr. Forbes here, who is the U.S. Vice President of Sales and the head of education for the U.S. for the Loch Lomond Group, which produces Glen Scotia and, of course, Loch Lomond, and the what I'm assuming is delicious blended Scotch Glengarry. I haven't actually picked that one up yet. I meant to do it before today's live stream, but like an idiot, I forgot. So, in no particular order of importance, we have Mr. Forbes McMullin, who I already said is the U.S. Vice President of Sales for the Loch Lomond Group. Forbes, how are you today?
Doing great, Sam. Thanks. How are you?
Doing well. Great to have you. We have Mr. Mitch McDonald, who is the, at least LA, SoCal, kind of West Coasty, I don't actually know his territory, for Blue Ridge Spirits, which is the new supplier slash importer slash distributor interfacer for Loch Lomond Group whiskeys. And then we have Gary Mills, the Glen Scotia brand manager, on the call with us today. And then a little bit later on, there's a very, 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 very high chance that we will have the distinct pleasure of having Ian McAllister, the master distiller, join us. So, Mitch and Gary, how are you guys?
Doing well, great. How are you, Sam?
Hanging in there, man. Just another day in, COVID paradise here in Los Angeles.
Yes, indeed.
Listen, it could be worse. It's just started snowing here.
You know what? I actually kind of would welcome the snow, but we've been having a heat wave.
I was gonna say
it's been almost 90.
You guys' screens are looking far too sunny for my liking. It's just come on.
Well, I can't say anything to that. Am I frozen?
Yeah, you have now.
Yeah, I believe so.
Your connection's got COVID, I guess, or something.
Well, it's okay. It's just a 14-day quarantine. We'll come back in a couple of weeks.
Well, Gary and Mitch, how are you? How are you guys?
Good, thank you very much, Forbes. Thank you very much. Yeah, Scotland is cold and wet as usual. That's just kind of part of the course for us. But thankfully, I have whiskey to keep me warm.
Yes, I got a full supply here as well. So I'm very happy to have this help me get through these tough times.
Yeah,
Mitch, how are you?
I'm doing well. Thanks, Forbes.
Good.
So I think when Sam's come back, Sam comes back, we're going to go through some of the core range. Certainly, I'll look with a couple of US lines and a couple of lines that I know have just landed in the US. So in terms of order for you guys, so we know, we're going to go through the unpeated first. So we'll start with double cask onto 15, Toriana 18, and then we'll have about 25.
Okay.
And then we'll probably move on to the 10, and then go through onto the Festival Edition 14-year-old.
Great. Okay.
Sounds good.
Yeah.
Going through the unpeated then before kind of kicking into something that I think makes a lot of sense for us, and keeps the palate in some sort of shape when you're going through that many whiskies.
That sounds good. Yeah.
Yeah. So for folks watching, in terms of we know Sam's a big fan of Campbelltown. I have forever had a soft spot for Campbelltown. I've been with the Loch Lomond Group for coming on 6 years now, and my very first week with the company was spent in Campbelltown, and I have just been bitten by the Campbelltown bug ever since. And so Ian McAllister's got a lot to answer for. To be fair, it was him and the team that really kind of got me into whiskey. Double cask specifically that started the whiskey journey, and yeah, it's just been all the way downhill from there.
I'm back.
Welcome back, Sam.
I say this every week, but I will fix the fucking internet eventually.
Yeah, good luck.
after that ordeal, I need a whiskey. Before we started the show, Gary and I were talking about a pre-dram or a pre-show warm-up dram. So I'm actually going to go ahead and do that with the double cask, which is actually one of my favorite scotches to shoot, believe it or not.
You guys
I have a
whiskey. Honestly, come on.
That sounds good.
I have a bad habit of intentionally shooting high-end whiskey to piss somebody off.
I did see your latest one. What was it? A 26-year-old? It was that's a fair whiskey to shot, mate. But listen,
Quick hello to the folks in the comments.
The way that works for you.
Cheers.
Yeah, so the question I was asking was, does it make me a terrible person that when I'm doing a whiskey tasting, I have a warm-up dram to kind of warm my palate up? But apparently not. I don't know. I've asked a few people and they've all said that's fine. I mean, it's probably better for me because it's 10 o'clock at night here. What is it? It's like 2 o'clock in the afternoon for you guys. So
it's just about 2 o'clock in the afternoon for me. Forbes, you're on Texas time, right?
I am Texas, yes. I think my volume will better. I can hear you guys that well.
Just about 4 o'clock for Forbes then. Mitch and I live only about 20 miles apart, so same time for us.
Right.
Gonna actually do my volume as well. Turn it down a little bit. A quick hello to the folks down in the comment section who are chatting live with us. Our friend David Volkov from the Arizona whiskey community. Hey, David, welcome in. Thanks for coming and hanging out. A hello to my friends at the Whiskey Crusaders, Matt, Will, and Sarah, as well as T Squared. And we have a new visitor. We have Renita, who is joining for the first time today. So, hey, Renita, welcome. And Gary, Tracy Officer says you're looking good.
Thanks very much, Tracy. Much appreciated.
So, my one quick shot aside, again, sorry for the late start, you guys. There was a little bit of technical difficulties besides my internet. It usually only happens once a stream, but in the chance that it does happen again, the benefit of having these fine gentlemen here is that they can talk all your ears off. So, Gary, you and I discussed the lineup that you thought was going to be ideal to go through.
Yes.
We were going to do the double cask, the 15, the Victoriana, the 18, and move over to the other side of my table to the 25, the 10, and then the Tawny Port Campbellton Malts Festival, right?
Absolutely. Yep.
Forbes, Mitch, how's that sound to you guys?
That sounds perfect. Perfect.
Fantastic. So, without further ado, I've had my one little shot, and I wasn't kidding. I have a bottle, or there was a bottle at my friend's restaurant that closed, unfortunately. It actually closed before COVID. But I was pretty much the only person who drank it because I was the only one who knew it existed. I'm like, yeah, that Glen Scotia double cask. They're like, where is it? I'm like, it's down below in the corner. They're like, oh, so it is.
Four in from the right, second shelf down.
Something like that. They're like, it's not back here. I'm like, oh, they're probably hiding down below in the corner in the back. So the double cask. Yeah, please.
So Sam, you're obviously a big Campbelltown fan. What's your history with the region?
So yes, huge Campbellton fan, and I really do wish there was more Scotch coming out of Campbelltown. Glen Scotia and Loch Lomond are of course fantastic, as is Springbank and Hazelburn and Kilkerran. My history with the region probably started with Springbank, and I just fell in love with the distillate because I find Campbellton has that kind of distinct, meaty, more heavier, shorter still kind of distillate. So it's a heavier, more flavorful, more meaty, estery spirit.
Yeah, it always. I don't know. I don't find that amazing. I think the regions probably aren't discussed and they aren't referenced as much as they are as Scotch is becoming more and more popular again. I think people are just enjoying the flavours that they find. But one of the things I would say about Campbelltown, for me, it's one of the regions that has such a real unique flavour profile to it. It's so very, very different from the other four. And that's one of the things I absolutely love about it is that uniqueness. There's obviously then variations between what we do at Glen Scotia and what our colleagues over at Springbank do, but there are clear similarities for me. And there's that real Campbelltown DNA through almost everything.
Exactly.
And I think it's just magnificent. While you were off, Sam, one of the things I was saying was I've been with the Loch Lomond group for about 6 years now. And my first week on the job was spent down in Campbelltown. And that was it for me. I was bitten by the bug and been taken.
You lucky son of a bitch.
Yeah, but listen. I fully appreciate how lucky I was with it, and I probably didn't appreciate it at the time, but because it was real. It was a week of spending time with Ian and the team and just finding out what they do, why they're doing it, and getting to drink whiskey with these guys. And I think at the time I was just this is just normal. This is what everyone does. Just drinks whiskey with the master distiller and his team. And then it's going more and more.
A lot of us put master distillers on pedestals, myself included sometimes. But at the same time, most of the time they're just whiskey nerds like us.
Yeah. Well, you've got to be, Sam. I think that's what you'll find with most people that work in the whiskey business is that they are whiskey lovers first and foremost. And I think to get to the level of master distiller, you've got to be a whiskey geek. You've got to.
I'm really glad. I'm really glad you said that, because a lot of the people I know who have ended up pursuing a career in whiskey, like myself, for instance, I didn't drink until I was 21. Because over here in the States, the legal age is 21, but not a lot of people listen to that. But that's beside the point. But I really didn't drink until I was 21. And when I fell in love with whiskey and single malt, Scotch whiskey especially, I was exploring it for the sake of exploring it and learning about it and trying it. And that passion and curiosity developed into a career that I'm super grateful for.
No, totally agree. And I think one of the things that I think that sets some of us apart that mean we do end up in the industry is that sometimes you need that voice alongside you, that kind of somebody to help lead you through that journey. And that can be one person, that can be a whiskey club, it can be a group, it can be these guys in the chat. It's one of my favourite things about working on whiskey is the whiskey community. Everybody's so nice. Everybody appreciates that everyone has their own preferences and different tastes. And it's just everyone will help keep you on a path of exploration. And I don't think anybody's quite completed the whiskey journey yet. I think maybe Richard Patterson's as close as anybody could be on that.
I 100% agree. Community is so important. Because of the whiskey community, actually, is where and how I met Forbes.
Yep.
Forbes, do you remember?
Yeah, I do. It was about 4 years ago, I think.
God, was it 4 years already?
Yeah, it was 4 years ago. So it was in the backyard of the house where they filmed Back to the Future.
Yep.
In Pasadena. But I just wanted to throw in a few comments about Campbelltown. As Gary mentioned, he's been with the company for 6 years. I'm almost 5, and my first trip ever to Campbelltown was actually with Gary. And we, for those of you that aren't geographically familiar with Campbelltown, it sits at the end of this peninsula called Kintyre. Is that Kintyre Peninsula, Gary?
Kintyre Peninsula, yep. Well, the
Kintyre Peninsula. It's about a 3.5 hour drive from Glasgow, which is where we were, or about a 20-minute flight. So Gary, my wife, and the pilot were the only 4 people on this plane that we took down to Campbelltown. We took a day trip down there. And it's in a really beautiful part of the country, and it sits at the end of this peninsula. And one of the things I remember Gary telling me on the way down there, was back in the Victorian era. So this is during Queen Victoria's reign, which roughly 1840 to 1900. Campbelltown was the whiskey capital of the world. It was the last place, because it sits at the end of this peninsula in the southwestern part of the country, that it was the last place where all the ships that were sailing off to the U.S. would pick up all of their whiskeys and all their provisions before sailing off to the U.S. So at the time of that Victorian area, roughly 150 years ago, but there was close to 40 distilleries. There, Gary, is that, I think that's what you hope?
Yeah, give or take over the period, there are various numbers, but I think 32 in total, but at any time 26.
20, okay. So then,
Legal
this obviously is back, up till around 1900. Then you had some pretty historically significant events that happened in the early 20th century with World War I and Prohibition and the Great Depression and World War II. So obviously all that demand for all these whiskeys plummeted. So at one point, all these distilleries, it got down to just two. So it was really just Springbank and Glen Scotia. So just, two distilleries in this region. You got to realize right now, I think last count, there's 133 different Scotch distilleries spread around 5 different regions.
Wow.
With roughly 50 in Speyside, roughly 40 in the Highlands, and then maybe 8 or 10 in both Islet and Lowlands, and then just 3 in the Campbelltown region. But at one point there was just 2, and I think Gary, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think the Scotch Whisky Association said, if there only be two distilleries in the Campbelltown region, we're just going to basically combine that with the Highlands. So Speyside, or I'm sorry, Springbank, which is the J&A Mitchell company, I think they went ahead and basically brought the Glengyle distillery back to life to at least have 3 distilleries, and that's obviously where they make the Kilkerran. But you really just have 3 distilleries now. But there's just so much historical significance with Campbelltown, and used to be the capital of whiskey, and now just down to 3 little distilleries, with Glen Scotia being one of them, and the town is very small and remote. But like I said, it was just a great experience to go down there and visit this with Gary. But there's just so much history with Campbelltown that I wanted to at least make sure that we touch base on on the fact that there are just 3 distilleries in this little teeny region right now, and hopefully there'll be more with the Campbelltown Malts Festival and everything happening and starting to draw some crowds. That I think things have definitely been heading in the right direction, especially when we did did a full renovation of the Glen Scotia distillery and the visitor center and everything. So it's really exciting to see what's happening in the Campbelltown area right now.
So I'm really glad you mentioned regions, Forbes, and Gary, you mentioned it a little bit as well. A lot of people recently have been saying that, well, yeah, there are regions, but regions don't particularly matter, because Highlands can taste like Speyside, Speysides can taste like Islas can taste like Orkneys, or Outer Hebrides.
Right.
On that topic, real quick, what do you guys feel about that from your experience? Obviously, I was saying it earlier, I feel Campbelltown, really does have a distinct, heavier, meatier style. But again, not all distilleries are going to follow that. If Campbelltown does start becoming popular again, there could be, distillery XYD that comes in and gets, really tall column stills and starts doing single grain.
I think Forbes probably touched on it in terms of, you think of the 2 big regions being Speyside and Highlands, and the sheer number of distilleries that are in those 2 regions. If you think there's almost 100 distilleries between those 2 regions, there is the competition is so intense. You need to do something to stand out. You can, if you're a Speyside distillery and you just decide you're putting out a classic Speyside malt, you're not going to last. That's you need, everybody needs their unique selling point, and I think that's where Campbelltown really benefits from only having 3 distilleries. We've got that, and the fact that we've got a very distinct style that is still, because again there are only 3 of us, it's very definable. We're both doing very similar things. Like I said, there are offshoots from Glen Scotia and Springbank, but there is that clear salinity, that oiliness.
Definitely.
That one, yeah.
Absolutely.
It's something you can even see, when you swirl around your glass, the legs on it, and Obviously with the Loch Lomond Group, we have the Loch Lomond Distillery, which is, Highlands region, 45 minutes or so northwest of Glasgow on the south shore of Loch Lomond, but definitely inland. And then you have the Glen Scotia Distillery, which sits, on a peninsula surrounded by three sides of ocean. So, one thing, you really notice when you go into the Glen Scotia Distillery is you have that saltwater smell in the air. I mean, the distillery is about 200 yards from the water. So, it's something that, the saltiness in the air definitely is picked up, and it, you can see it in the, in the whiskey, but we don't have any of that obviously at Loch Lomond because we're nowhere close to the ocean in comparison. So, I mean, there certainly are some very big differences, as far as the geography goes. And then, obviously the weather is different. The warehouse temperatures are different in Campbelltown versus in the Loch Lomond distilleries. There are some major differences just with, with the weather conditions and so forth.
Gents, I'm very conscious we've been talking for about 20 minutes and I'm gagging for a whiskey. Should we get stuck into double cask?
Yes. While you guys are going into that, we had a couple of related questions coming through the comments. Renita asked, do you think there will be more Glen Scotia coming in imported now that TTB is allowing 700 mLs, or for you, Gary, 70 CL?
I'd love to see more Glen Scotia in the US, 100%. I don't know if we've always been doing 750 mLs, so I don't think it was necessarily a barrier to us getting Glen Scotia in. It's as we know, it's a very crowded marketplace, and I think if you think that the Loch Lomond Group only bought over Glen Scotia and Loch Lomond 5-6 years ago. So we're still very much at that beginning bit of the journey. And I think you'll really start to see more and more Glen Scotia. And I don't know if it will be 70 CL might be that final wee chink that really see us kick on and do some great things in the States. But yeah, it's certainly going to make things easier. That's for sure. I think my big worry, and it's not obviously in terms of you guys, my worry is for the South African markets. Because obviously they benefited with them being 75 CLs as well. If we're doing a 75 CL for the States, then it makes sense. With South Africa being a smaller market, you could lump that in. But if everybody now just jumps and does 70 CLs for the US, that could I think the South Africans need to get out there and get their regulations changed a wee bit before it causes them some fair old troubles.
Yeah.
Well, he's back again. Sam, I thought you said once per stream.
Right.
Once per stream, you promised.
Usually one.
Are you tethered off your phone or something right now?
I just switched to that, actually. I was not, but I am now.
Good.
And then Tracy also said that, Gary, Glenfarclas has lasted 160 years in the same family, just putting out a simple Speyside malt.
That's fair. I was more meaning if somebody was to start now in that crowded marketplace. I think 160 years ago it was a wee bit different. But I think Glenfarclas have also got a very kind of clear differential in terms of everything they produce is sherried as well.
Welcome to the stream, Ian McAllister, Master Distiller, Glen Scotia Scotch Whiskey. Hi, Ian. How are you?
Hello.
The man, the legend.
That beard gets thicker and thicker each time I see you.
That's it. Work in progress. My goodness. Yes.
It is.
How's everyone? How's Forbes, Gary, Sam?
All great.
Good to see you.
All great.
Better for having you.
Good to see you
What's the
again.
last to see Mr. McAllister?
It's basically a Tony, so that's the festival. So this year's festival release.
You're a few drums ahead of us, but we're still on double cask.
All right. My apologies.
T Squared asked, someone at a store told him, let me see if I can get that pulled up, that they don't expect anything new on the shelves until mid to late summer due to COVID impacts on distillery operations. Is that something that we should be concerned about?
No. I'll let Ian talk a bit more to that, but I mean,
right.
one of the key things for us was making sure the distilleries were still going.
That may apply to some distilleries, not us.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we were obviously stopped from the end of March until the end of July, but from that point onwards, we've been working away as best we can. That said, the shop's shut, so sales is obviously is basically online at the moment, So, but apart from that, yeah, we're working away. Small team, it's quite a small distillery, so we could manage that quite safely. So yeah, it's difficult.
The other thing you need to remember is even if we did have to, if we had stopped distillation for the last year, it wouldn't be 10, 12 years until we felt that impact. Obviously with the kind of length of time for the maturation and things.
Well, sure, it wouldn't. It would take 10 to 12 years to affect, stock. Yeah. But I think they're more talking about in terms of bottling, unless you don't bottle on site.
No, we've got a separate bottling plant through in Ayrshire, but again, yeah, we very quickly at the start of everything kicked a lot of safety measures into gear. Introduced the social distancing side of things, outsourced some repacking and things just to allow us that space and time. We maybe weren't running at the efficiency we would have been pre-COVID, but that was key for us kind of early on to ensure the health and safety of the staff at the end of the day. Whilst also maintaining some level of operation. Yeah, for sure.
Absolutely.
Probably a bit ironically, this year we've actually done 2 years worth of peated stock. So we've ran medium peated and heavily peated. We're still on the heavily peated as we talk, and we will be at the end of January. So, yeah, it's It has its benefits too. So it's just the way it's worked in for us, and it's been good. It's been good, challenging but good.
So Ian, before you joined, we were kind of talking about the regions and Campbelltown's style and some of the flavor profiles that oftentimes I find are the heavier, meatier, more estery, shorter kind of pot still-esque flavors. How would you describe in your very, very expert opinion the Campbelltown style?
Well, even the Campbelltown style, you could talk about whiskies from different regions, but even the Campbelltown style between three distilleries varies quite a bit. There's certainly, there's a lot of similarities in there. There's a lot of similar descriptors, if you like. I mean, you're talking from Glen Scotia point of view, absolutely. You've got that maritime-esque influence there. Certain amount of robustness there, as you mentioned there. The stills are quite short, but obviously how we operate them, the charge capacities of the stills obviously influence what we're collecting from them, and the fermentations. The fermentations are long fermentations, so again we're building up that wonderful flavour profile. So absolutely, if you throw a little bit of peat in there, then you've got your archetypal Campbelltown whiskey. So it's wonderful whiskey. Absolutely unbiased, but it's it really is flavoursome, and that's what it's all about. It's.
I don't know if you saw any of the marketing I did for today's show, Ian, but I've called Glen Scotia one of my favorite Campbelltown Scotch whiskies. Out of all the brands produced, there are obviously 3 distilleries, but there's like 6, 7 brands being produced there. Glen Scotia is hands down one of my favorites.
Absolutely. It's got a lot going for it. As I say, I'm no salesman. I'm really not any salesman at all, any shape or form. But it really has. Once you taste it and once you appreciate it, and once you get to know what it's all about, absolutely, Campbelltown, has got a huge part to play in that. The history of the not just the distillery but the region itself. Once you understand all the different components that go together to obviously create what is Glen Scotia, then yeah, it's a wonderful whiskey. It's approachable whiskey, and it can obviously manifest itself in many different guises. So yeah, wonderful whiskey.
And you don't even have to be biased because you have some great backup with some what we consider to be very, very strong veritable sources as far as the Jim Murray Whiskey Bible over here, which is something that everybody uses as a reference guide, and also it's the San Francisco World Spirits Competition, obviously based in northern part of your state, Sam, has become probably the most globally recognized spirits competition now out
the
there.
SS Spirits Comp is actually, of the ones you mentioned, the only one I respect.
Yeah, so
I've said this publicly before, I'll say it publicly again. I do not appreciate the way things went down with Jim Murray. I don't think he was being appropriate. And that's all I'll say on that.
Well, we continue to get great scores from him where, when you benchmark our different age statements against our competitive sets, we have higher scores than anybody else. And then in addition to that, with San Francisco, everything that Glen Scotia has produced in our core portfolio is either a gold. I think actually the Glen Scotia Double Cast, which is this first one here that we've tasted, which is, it's got a nice PX sherry finish on it. That's the only gold. Everything else is a double gold, and then the 25-year just picked up a platinum in last year's competition. Wow. So it's really unbelievable. We don't have any bronzes or any silvers. Just one gold, and everything else is a double gold, which means, I believe, Gary probably knows better, but I think there's 45 judges, and it means they unanimously give a brand a gold, which is obviously,
and they do it blind.
They're the highest rating you can get, and a platinum, which I think only 8 Scotches have ever even received that.
One of 10.
One of 10. Okay, so 10. The Glen Scotia 25 is one, and that means that it's received a double gold 3 years in a row. So, it's not just Ian being biased. So this is that these are some great scotches he's producing. He makes my job.
Biased or not, we all agree they're damn good scotches. He can be biased all he wants, and yes, there's absolutely awards to back it up, but the whiskey just stands on its own. I moved on to the 15-year now, and just the bready malt of this. Yeah. And the fruit, it's got really like fruit, like stewed fruit on the nose.
Yeah. This guy for me, Sam, genuinely is Campbelltown in a glass. This for me embodies everything you would want from a Campbelltown malt. It's got that wonderful oiliness. It's got that maritime influence. The fruit is there. The body of that whiskey is just phenomenal. And then you've got that wonderful sweet bourbon tang as well. And I think it's testament to the work that Ian does, and obviously Mr. Henry, our master blender, that all of those flavours just sing together. No one flavour, and across the range for me, none of them are overpowered by anything else. You almost get waves of flavours that maybe come through water or just through time, but everything for me works in wonderful unison. Just a great balance across the
Absolutely.
That is so good.
Slange away, gentlemen.
Slange, Gary. Slange. I think that's it. That's the beauty of just about all the Glen Scotias. There is that wonderful balance. And I think that's the secret of any good whiskey is balance. Whether it's wherever it's from. You've really got to get that balance. All the components must come together, and there must be a synergy. And I think when you get that, then it works. It works in the palate. So, yeah.
This is just so creamy. It does have that beautiful weight to it. It's oily, it's creamy, it's viscous.
Creme brulee, and one of the favorite things about 15 is that kind of spice that comes in.
Yeah.
Definitely get a lot of spice on the mid palate leading into the finish, especially as more and more air comes in your mouth, the more and more hot air I let out, be it I can fill up a room with hot air.
No comment, Sam. No comment. Moving on.
Just going to kick Gary out of the stream.
And it's not an aggressive spice for me. It's more a kind of stem ginger, nice warming spice. I think one of my favorite.
It's like ginger syrup. I'm glad you said ginger, because you know what? It tastes like the finish on a penicillin, actually. Okay. That sweetened ginger spice.
Yeah.
I don't know if you guys have them over there, but we've got a biscuit over here that's called ginger snap biscuits. A small round.
We have ginger snaps.
And that is a great note for me on that, a ginger snap biscuit.
So that kind of cinnamon, ginger, like kind of cookie-ish.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, biscuit, cookie, same thing for you. Same thing over here. Biscuit there, cookie here.
Yeah. That nice sweetness. There's a sweet element. There's that, like you said, that kind of biscuity with that wonderful kind of ginger heat as well. I think it's just
citrus too. You get that lovely citrus. It's all balanced and offset by citrus peel. Which is wonderful. It really is.
That is I really like that. Gary, is he quoting you? Did I miss a great quote from you?
I can't lay claim to the musical medley, but I think that's all T squared. I'm saying that everything's got to work in unison. Everything's got to work together. That it can't be. You can't have a kind of battle of flavors, if you like.
I mean, some battle of flavors is a good thing and it's expected, but yeah, no, definitely. You really need to just have everything work so well together in unison. T squared, it should be like tasting a musical medley of flavors, not a single screaming instrument. That's beautiful.
And I think
so
it's
beautifully
one
described.
of the things, there's another one of the things you'll find as we kind of go through the whiskies. There are different flavors. There are obviously price points as you kind of go through the range. But I think for me as well, whiskies for me are sometimes about different experiences and different what whiskies you're looking for at that kind of time. I think, like you said, sometimes you just want a really easy to drink whiskey that you don't need to think about, that you just know tastes good. But there are other times when you want to, and we'll come on to it after this, where you want to go into something like Victoriana, where you get to the end of a night and you want to spend an hour with 1 dram. I mean, it needs to be a big dram, obviously. But you want to spend time and you want to explore it and get into the layers of a whiskey. But that's not going to be all the time. So, like I said, sometimes you've just finished your day of work, you've just done your homeschooling, the kids are still just running about, the dinners just get burnt to the pot, and you just want a whiskey. Is it just me? Is that?
Yeah, that's it.
Yes.
Absolutely.
I have been so tempted recently to pour some whiskey into the pan as I'm cooking to either kind of flambe my steak, which probably won't work, or to try and impart some of that Scotchy goodness into some of the meat.
The one of my favourite ways of doing it through a peppercorn sauce. If you had a nice splash of a whiskey into a peppercorn sauce, especially a steak, that tends to work really, really nicely.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
I might try pouring some whiskey, some Scotch into a sous vide bag, a vacuum seal bag, and when I do my next sous vide, that might be really fun.
That would have been an interesting experiment.
Yep, absolutely. It's just whatever works. That's it.
No, it's just you playing. It's just you with Play-Doh, Gary.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I was playing with Play-Doh with my 3-year-old this afternoon. It was technically homeschooling. We're doing shapes and colors.
Is that what they call it over there? And I thought we had a bad education curriculum.
Well, listen. When I'm the teacher, then it's just you need to just take whatever you can get. She wasn't really paying attention to fermentation 101. Do you know what I mean? That was going a wee bit over her head.
I've seen a few memes throughout this whole thing of homeschooling and talking about marketing and like fermentation distillation with the kids. It's kind of funny. I got a kick out of that the couple of times I've seen it. It's like, all right, now today's lesson, fermentation 101.
Fermentation 101, we go long and slow.
So actually, why don't you guys talk a little bit about the Glen Scotia fermentation process while we are on the topic of fermentation anyway?
Yep. Yeah, absolutely. Well, obviously, the fermentation process, it was, well, like Glen Scotia, it wasn't as long, previously as it is now, but now it's obviously considerably longer. And that pretty much changed when we changed the wash barks. Historically, when I started in 2008, was still the old Corton steel washback, and only 6 of them. So while you're obviously limited to the quantity you're producing, you also limit the time, the time scale you could obviously ferment for, so it was obviously time to increase the number of washbacks, change the material to stainless steel from Corton steel, which was the wonder material from the 50s and 60s, was mild steel, which was coated with zinc. So we basically upgraded the washbacks, looked at a lot of different aspects of the fermentation, technically the yeasts, the charge capacities, etc. And we pretty much got where we had to be with Glen Scotia, what was historically Glen Scotia, and what was produced previously to a lesser or greater degree. So it took a number of years, to be fair, to obviously get it to where it had to be. But obviously nowadays, fantastic. The new make spirit that we're obviously gleaning, the higher alcohol content, the makeup of that, the esters, the acids, etc. Everything that's in that, is obviously purely from that fermentation process. We are where we wanted to be now, and it's tricky. It's really is. It takes up a lot of your time. At the time, I worked quite closely with John Peterson, who was the director of production at Loch Lomond. So interesting times. Nowadays, our average fermentation time is, what is it, Gary? Can you mind?
128.8 hours.
Okay, I have to make the change, Ian. I still have 127 in my notes from. So
do not forget the 0.8. Right, the 0.8 is crucial.
The 0.8 is critical. The place would fall down if it was changed.
Yes, 128.8. 48 is average, I believe.
Yeah, absolutely. It does vary slightly, but it's that's, as I say, it's a batch process. So you're working from a whatever your lowest number would be. In our case, we're roughly about 70 hours, and we'll go right up to potentially over 140 plus hours there, 45 hours at some point. So there's quite a variation there, but obviously the end result, the semblance of flavors at the end of that, fantastic. It really is fantastic.
What is the big benefit of that, Ian? We know that kind of that after about 40 to 60 hours, the yeast's done, and there's no more alcohol to be gained. So what are we getting from that extra 90 odd hours?
Well, obviously, as I say, when you look at distilleries of old, that's all they were after. That there wasn't really, they knew about maybe not as technically as we do nowadays, but you tend to think older distilleries, they never knew much. They did actually know quite a lot about fermentation, to be fair. But purely nowadays, that's purely flavour profile. So we're really after that flavour profile, so it works for us. The amount of yeast, as I say, we're putting 75 kilos of yeast, different variations there, M and MX being a fast reacting yeast. So through that process, as Gary mentioned there, absolutely, the alcohol generation is critical. But to the Campbelltown standard, we don't want to go too high. We just want to get what would be perceived as, right, that's good. That's good for Campbelltown. We really don't want to go much higher than that. In our case, you roughly be about 7.5-ish, around that.
If you don't mind, let's just jump ahead a little bit.
Yeah.
We talk about fermentation, and believe me, I want to know everything, but we are in a somewhat of a deadline. We're already probably going to run over a little bit because we got started a little late, and then I kept dropping off. Hopefully that won't happen again. My next question really comes into barrels. What is your entry proof? Well, actually, you know what? Sorry, before you answer that, what are you distilling to?
Well, what the cut points are, Sam? Yeah.
Basically.
Yeah, well, we'll basically, as I say, the normal classic double pot still distillation at Glen Scotia. We'll normally, as I say, it's slightly different with the heavily peated. I'll explain that then. But normally, if it was an unpeated run, we would pretty much bring that still in. You'd be about 75%, alcohol by volume. That's obviously slightly different than your proof. So we're obviously going to come in at that range there. You're not going to be much higher than that. In fact, very rarely, it ever creeps above that. So it's pretty consistent. That's us obviously bringing that still in. So you're bringing the pot still in. The stillman's obviously controlling it with steam. Right. He's keeping an eye on obviously all the distillate in that safe at that point. And we'll basically take that down to, for the 4 shots, it'll probably drop to about 73%. So that's the initial 4 shots. Then from 73 down to 63, then that's the heart of the run for us. And below that, Sam, is obviously the fate.
Sorry, go ahead. My apologies.
So yeah, so that's basically, as I say, that's the faints below that. So we'll obviously go from 63 right down, for the faints. And if we're basically on the peated run, the heavily peated as we're on at the moment, then rather than 63, we'll take that down to 60%, which is slightly different again, and that's purely to collect the higher assemblance, if you like, of phenolic compounds at the end of that distillation run. So there's more, there's a greater prevalence of them, when you get down to that 50%.
So I'll ask a little more about peat when we get into some of the more peated expressions. I moved on to the Victoriana. Now my next question, real quick, before we get into the whiskey in the glass, for non-peated, what is your standard barrel entry?
For a non-peated whiskey?
Aye.
Well, I mean, I think obviously the double cask is a little bit of peat in that. Just trying to think exactly what ones we've.
I think Sam's asking what strength we put it into barrel at.
Oh right, sorry, my apologies. Well, we always 63.5, sometimes 63.4, but yeah, that's what we're obviously filling off at, Sam. So we're in about that. Yeah, that's strength.
Beautiful.
And it's
probably 99.95% first fill bourbon.
Yes.
Sorry, 99.95 first silver.
I mean, almost all of what we fill New Make Spirit into is into first fill bourbon.
I was impressed for a second, like, wow, he has that number down so exact.
I mean, no, it is definitely that exact number.
I pretty much spent the first 9 years I spent at Glen Scotia, Sam. Well, it was pretty much 100%. I was first fill bourbon. Absolutely, it was different. There was variety within the casks themselves. Where they came from, but yeah, it was. I was a bit obsessed with first fill bourbon casks. So yeah.
So Forbes, when you were across your first time in Campbellton, how many barrels did you thief?
How many did I what?
How many barrels did you pull from?
Well, I think if I want to say, I think Ian probably cracked 2 or 3. I think I want to say the first time.
Oh no, there's at least
just to
five.
give me a little bit of
at least 5.
5.
Oh, at least 5 in the Dutch.
Okay, well then 5. I mean, I know. I mean, I'm remembering pretty vividly the. I don't even know what you call that. Just a standard pump.
The Valanche.
What's it called?
Valanche.
Yes.
Yeah.
I remember it was. I remember it was the first. My first real bunghole experience. I do remember that. So and then I remember also we're talking about the Victoriana. I remember learning the hard way that that's a little bit stronger than some of the other scotches in the portfolio. And I was in the tasting room with Gary, and really liked the Victoriana, and then realized that it was coming in around. I think this was back when it was about 102 proof, and now it's even higher. Now it's closer to 107, 108. But
The Victoriana I've got here is coming in at 51.5.
right. Well, it is sent. I think now that it's coming in 54.
54.2.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
But
Which actually leads us into David's question of, are there any cask strength offerings from Glen Scotia?
Yes. As the short answer that I see you've
And
got
I
there.
said, great question. I'll have them answer in a few, but the short answer is yes. One of them being the Victoriana.
So Victoriana is the obvious one from the core range.
Yeah.
And that for us will, as long as I can breathe, that will forever be cask strength. What can I
Got it. Make sure Gary stays alive long enough to have a stockpile of Victoriana.
when we get through it, we'll kind of get into the story of the Victoriana and why we've done it that way. But yeah, and then from there, in terms of limited editions, so when we come on to the Tawny Port at the very tail end, one of the key things that Ian and I have worked together in terms of that, the limited editions, if you're going to do something special, do it special and do it right. So it's for me, and I think Ian and I are both on the same page, and that it's going to be cask strength, natural colour, non-chill filtered.
Yeah.
If it's going to be a limited edition, it's going to be something
Music
special.
to my ears.
Yeah.
Go big or go home. If you're doing limited edition, do you know what I mean?
That's right.
But
now, really quick, Gary, if I may.
Sorry,
I know we originally were going to go from 2 to 3, but we're only on whiskey number 3 out of 7. If anybody has to drop off, I completely understand that. I will only slightly hold it against you. No, I'm kidding. Forbes, Gary, Ian, if any of you guys have to drop off, if not, I would love to keep going because this is fantastic and there's such great whiskey, such great knowledge being shared today.
No, listen, the kids are in bed. You've got me for the night. That's me. I'm hunkered down. Listen, I'm not doing this setup and then just walking away from it.
That's right.
Spoken like a true Scot.
Can't even see what's down here.
That's it. It's looking good. It's looking good, Gary.
Thanks, Ian. I've got whiskey.
Forbes, I assume you're good to go still?
Yeah,
you bet.
So should we get into Victoriana?
Fantastic. Let's do it. I've been sipping on it already, and oh boy, this has replaced a double cask as my favorite.
So the wonderful thing about Victoriana is that you've got the core thing for us on this, and as Forbes alluded to at the start, the Campbelltown region was known as the Victorian whisky capital of the world. And for the best part of 100 years, if you were drinking Scotch whisky across the world, you were drinking Campbelltown whisky. And this bottling is our homage to that period. And it's everything from the bottle, the colour, the height, the design, all the way through to the liquid as a nod to that. So I
thought it was a 1 liter. I'm like, is this a 1 liter? It's extra tall.
No, we made a very clear choice to make that taller than the rest of the rest of the range. And in terms of that being the only green bottle from the range, when you look back to the Victorian era and glass at that time, if you think about it, not everybody. Wasn't our most literate time, let's be honest. The proportion of people that could read was very small. So there was a very
on that, I heard that one of the reasons that pubs didn't have names, but they had symbols where the people could recognize the symbols. So, oh yeah, it's the toad and ostrich.
Yeah, no, exactly, and it's the same thing with glass, and that they simplified it down so there were essentially 4 types of glass. You had clear glass, brown glass, blue glass, and green glass. And the clear differences were green was alcohol, brown was poison, and blue was medicine. And it was literally as simple as that. So that you knew if you had a green bottle in your hand, you could drink it. If you had a brown bottle in your hand, you put that down and you back away from that real quick. So that nod to the Victorian style. And then I'm going to hand off to Ian because it's.
So, when can we expect the Glen Scotia limited release in blue glass?
Yeah. Well, the medicinal release.
Yeah, it's medicine, right?
Yeah.
Now look here. If you treat an outside wound with the rubbing alcohol, you treat an inside wound with drinking alcohol. It's
Wait.
science.
What
Aye.
percentage does it need to be to kill COVID? Oh no, it's over 60, isn't it? No, we're a wee bit short.
A wee bit shy.
That's the COVID 21 release.
Yeah.
So I will hand off to Mr. McAllister because it's Victoriana, as I alluded to earlier on. It's a wonderful complex whiskey.
Yeah,
but it's got a bit of a complex recipe to go with that.
It has. I mean, yeah, absolutely, Gary. You know, and what Gary says there, you know, it is a wonderful, you know, it really a stroke of genius. You know, the way it's been put together. You know, the flavour profile, everything from that era. You know, potentially that late Victorian period. You know, where you get that. You actually touched on it, Sam, when you said that meatiness, and there is a meatiness, you know, and it's not a term that I use that often, but there is that meatiness through it. You know, it's robust. It's got that lovely flavour, some robustness, that little bit of peat there. So, you know, it really, really works well. You know, it really highlights, you know, what you're getting from that period. And basically what you potentially got with that, you know, obviously it's an unaged statement, so absolutely, you know, there's going to be variations in the stock profile that's used, you know, how that's put together. But pretty much you'll get a combination of first and second fill bourbons. That'll be vatted together, and we'll fill it off into 30% sherry PX butts and 70% heavily char, a real heavily char in American barrels. We'll leave it for 12 months, and then we'll take the two different assemblage of liquids and we'll marry them together. So it's not just like vat it, you're obviously marrying them together. So you've got that 30% sherry and the 70% heavily char. Bring them together and you'll bottle it off at cask strength. So really works well. Wonderful.
I hope everybody's taking notes for the quiz at the end. Yeah, we mentioned that, didn't we, Sam? There was going to be a quiz.
Absolutely.
I think so, right? It's, you know, the winner gets a bottle of 25 sent directly from your personal collection, right, Gary?
Yeah, no, it's that one you've got there.
Forbes, because you had the U.S., my next question specifically is for you. Where can people find, you know, the Victoriana? I know some people were asking about the Campbellton Malt Special in 25. Assuming both of those are, you know, readily available, where can people find them? For instance, you know, Whiskey Crusaders are actually not too far from you. They're based in Austin, just outside of Austin, closer to Dallas, actually.
Well, are you talking out in California where are we mostly available?
California, but also, you know, Texas, for instance. Because I know those Crusaders were asking about it. They're from Texas.
Yeah, Texas, we're available at all the goody stores. And then California, you know, but also, I guess also in Austin, we're available in Specs. So Specs and Goody are the two big chains here. We're available in all of those. And in California, Bevmo and, you know, High Times are certainly, I think High Times carries everything, you know, Southern Cal, Bevmo more or less statewide. You know, we're with Mitch being on board with us now with Blue Ridge, we're going to be certainly expanding our distribution all over California as well. I mean, you know, K&L, they've actually sort of more or less tried to corner the market on our Campbelltown Festival the last couple of years. So that's where the majority of the Campbelltown Festival has gone to K&L out in California. So you certainly have the biggest percentage of it out there available. But we're going to be, you know, we're going to certainly be expanding our distribution enormously all over the place this year with Blue Ridge on board. But certainly already have some great distribution in the key chains in both Texas and California.
With Blue Ridge, that's actually a really good question. Something I want to know is, will the reserve be coming back?
Right now, we don't have any plans to bring any of the blends, Loch Lomond blends. In fact, I think there's been There's been a lot of confusion with it because, Loch Lomond is the only distillery that makes both blends and single malts at the same distillery. So, the fact that we have, like a Loch Lomond Reserve going for $14.99, on the shelf versus a Loch Lomond 50, which is retailing, in some places 23,000. It's a per bottle. It's a big spectrum, and price wise, and I think
it's a bit of a wide gap.
It's about as wide as you can get. So, I think we're going to be focusing just with Blue Ridge strictly on our single malt Loch Lomond line with them, and then obviously everything at Glen Scotia is single malts.
I gotta say, it does disappoint me a little bit, but we'll get into that when we talk about Loch Lomond. On for the Campbellton Malts Festival. Is there any available in Texas?
Well, I don't think there's any available of the 2020, but there will be of the 2021. I mean, all the 2020 is gone. I mean, there might be some remaining bottles at, like I said, out of K&L. But
K&L still has a few bottles. Yeah, I've been eyeing it for the past couple of weeks. Do I want to pull the trigger?
Yes.
We better get what there's left. I know that we just got some samples of the 2021 sent to Whisky Advocate. They're going to be running a big story on it here in a couple months for their spring edition. So we're expecting to get some really great exposure on that, and that's going to be very limited also. But it's going to be not all going to California because other markets have certainly stepped up and asked for it. So it's going to be more dispersed, a little more uniformly this year.
Matt, after the stream, send me a text. Remind me to send you and Forbes an email introduction so you guys can get acquainted. Forbes is also based in Texas, and he's saying that there will be more Glen Scotia coming to Texas, but you can look for them at Specs and Goody Goody.
Yes.
I think it's, as I said earlier on, Sam, we're still kind of at that upward bit of the curve, where I think certainly with the US, where Glen Scotia started off doing really well in a kind of small number of states. So a lot of the volume went to those small number of states. But I think as the word is spreading, and as more and more people are getting to try Glen Scotia, we get folk from more and more states screaming out for it. And what we are doing our absolute best to try and we're not. I mean, we're only producing 500,000 litres a year.
Yeah.
Of alcohol, so we're not churning it out at the same kind of volumes Loch Lomond are. So it's all about managing the stocks we've got, and I think we're always very conscious about trying to be as fair as we can, and get as much of it into as many places as we can, and give as many of our fans that chance to taste the good stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's obviously probably fair to say that the production levels in the near future, they're not going to increase much. So it's always going to be, well, hopefully it's not too scarce to get or too hard to come by.
We're not at that kind of spring malt level that it's getting half a dozen cases for the year and then it's gone.
Yeah.
But we're able to provide a consistent supply across a core range,
Yeah.
which I think is absolutely key. And that's been one of the core things for us, is being able to maintain that. So we're not spreading ourselves too thin, so that you're only getting 2 or 3 cases in a store, and once that's gone, you're not getting anything next year. It's trying to grow that organically, Sam, and make sure it's a sustainable level.
Yeah,
absolutely. One of the things that I like is that Glen Scotia is an independent distillery. It's not owned by, one of the major conglomerates, one of the major houses. There's nothing wrong with any of the Scotch coming out of any of the major houses. The Pernod Ricard, the Moet Hennessy portfolio, the Brown-Forman portfolio. There's nothing wrong with any of those Scotches. They're fantastic whiskeys. But I always like supporting smaller and more independent whenever possible, especially when, the whiskey is just so goddamn good.
Absolutely.
I'll write to that, Sam. I'll write to that.
Yeah.
I think
hold that there for a second. Let's move on to the
Can I just look back into one last point on Victoriana before we go on?
Of course.
So the one thing for me is that, and it's most prevalent in Victoriana. So my one's a 54, Yours is a 51.5. We've not even touched about adding water or anything like that. But this for me at a 54 genuinely drinks at like a 46.
Yeah, it does.
Yes, you do. I mean, there's an undeniable initial wave of alcohol. You can't deny that. You're not going to get a near 55% whiskey. It's not. But it smooths out almost instantly. It mellows really beautifully, and it just brings a wonderful depth. And I think that it's the most prevalent in the Victoriana. That's why I kind of brought it up now. But it's there across the range. It's the one that I always hark back to. Double cask at the very start. And it's not one that you guys don't have, but I refer to double cask for in Scotland. Scotland is the only reference point. Scotland is the only country in the world where Coca-Cola is not number one. In fact, it's not even top 3 drinks in Scotland. Iron Brew is the number 1 drink in Scotland.
Oh Jesus! I was about to say let's knock into Iron Brew.
But what I'm saying is that I refer to double cask as whiskey flavored Iron Brew.
Yeah.
Because I can genuinely drink that as if it's just pop to me. It's just, but it's a 46% malt.
Yeah, that's right.
That's across the board.
46% ABV, guys. By the way, not 46% of it is malted barley. It's a single malt, which is 100% malted barley. It's 46% ABV.
It's a very good point Gary made, because a lot of the Glen Scotias at higher strength are really, really accessible. They're really, although it's obviously higher alcohol, even up and beyond, 54, 55, 56, right up to even 57%. I want
to just throw up Renita's comment here real quick, y'all.
Yeah.
Renita says that my friends and I love supporting small craft and independent distilleries. Will encourage them now that I know that about yours. Speaking about Glen Scotia, Renita, where are you based out of, by the way? Maybe we can help you find some delicious Glen Scotia. It'll take a couple seconds. There's a few second delay. God, Iron Brew. You had to bring up Iron Brew.
Hello, I'm a Glaswegian. Sam, come on.
We'll forgive you for that.
You've got 20 minutes before I get into square sausage. It's fine.
One of my best mates, his actual last name is Glasgow.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. I think he's Edinburgh, though. He's from Edinburgh. I think he's from Edinburgh, but his last name is Glasgow.
That's a very unfortunate combination, is to be called Glasgow and live in Edinburgh, because there's a very clear east-west coast.
Rory, if you're on here, say hi. I know you said you were going to try and tune in. I don't know if you're here. I haven't seen anything come up from you. Renita is based in San Antonio, so Specs is their only option.
Right.
And my friend Joe Van Nem, who is also a whiskey sommelier, said the Victoriana was his dram of the summer.
There we go. Fantastic.
Yes.
It's funny that Sam, you'll know it. You go to plenty of festivals, and there will always be a different dram of choice that kind of comes through at every different festival, depending on where you are. Again, what time of year that festival's on. You'll tend to find one dram from a specific distiller will go down better. But for me, Victoriana consistently performs really well at festivals.
Yeah.
And I think it's because of that complexity to it. And it's, as much as it's a no-age statement, it's a no-age statement for a very clear reason, and that we set about to create a flavour. We set about to create a very clear flavour profile rather than just taking each parcel and bottle it.
Yeah.
It was all about creating that whiskey and recreating that modern Victoriana style whiskey.
Yeah.
And I think that's the reason that it consistently does well through these kind of shows.
Throughout my, whiskey time, I've had a large amount of delicious Scotch and a good amount of Glen Scotia. Forbes, I don't know if you by chance remember the lineup we had that night. I remember. I definitely do not remember that lineup. But
That was a big lineup. I know that we had.
Yeah.
I remember seeing some pictures, taking some pictures of it because it was we combined Loch Lomond and Glen Scotia, and Ian and Gary. We had Andy Calder in town for that one. This is
how is Andy?
I haven't seen him in the last year. I assume he's good, but this was 4 years ago, Sam. Yeah, so I think that's 2017. Hard to believe.
Yeah.
I'm seeing if I can find photos right now.
Yeah.
It's when you're doing a show where you've got a combined stand, it can be a fairly intimidating.
It was.
And yet, again, rewinding back to when I started with the company, we literally had 3 Glen Scotias with double cask 15 Victoriana, and we had 3 Loch Lomans, and that was crazy. So you had 6 on a table, and now we've got it's got to be pushing 20 Forbes.
If you remember, originally Forbes and I were going to be chatting, just he and I, and we were going to do Glen Scotia and Loch Lomond all today.
It's too much.
And somewhere along the line, I realized that's a really bad idea.
Yeah, it is.
Well, I mean, certainly for a Tuesday. I mean, for a Friday, that's fine.
Yeah, exactly.
Or a Glasgow Thursday.
It's too many, especially because now the Glen Scotia core lineup is bigger than the Loch Lomond core portfolio. So we got to give got plenty to go through here.
All right, I found it. So we had the reserve, the single grain for Loch Lomond, the original, the 12, 18, and the Inchmirren 18. Then we went into double cask for Glen Scotia, 15 Glen Scotia, and Victoriana.
Yeah.
And it looks like those are just boxes in the background. Okay, so that was the lineup that night.
And that because that was before we had the 18 and the 25 and the 10 for Glen Scotia. So
yeah.
That was a hell of a night, and it was a great night. I remember some of it, and I still had that Loch Lomond pin badge somewhere.
Yeah.
God bless smartphones for that, and that's the thing. It's not again now. It shows you will see guys that will come up, and as they're taking the whiskey, they'll take a quick snap of the label just to make sure that when they get up tomorrow, they remember everything they've done.
Quick side note. The night before I flew to Austin, Texas for my first ever level 1 and my first ever time going to the Whisky Academy for, the Whisky Marketing School and Sommelier program, was a cocktail event that I managed to get a comp ticket for. Let's just leave it at that. And I was going around trying out the cocktails, and this was before I worked in and on bars. I was working at a liquor store at that point. But I've been hanging around the industry, and what ended up happening was I would go and try and, redeem a token for a cocktail. Like, no, your money's no good here. Here's a cocktail. Go, shoo, get, scat. Go somewhere else now. And that went on all night because I knew almost all the bartenders running the booths, or I knew all the brand ambassadors working the booths. I almost missed my flight that morning. Let's just leave it at that.
Good complaint to have, Sam.
Cheers, by the way. On to the 18, I believe. Yes.
Yep. Now, Sam, if you want, I can go over all the different shelf prices for everything we've tasted so far, just so everybody has that.
Forbes, that would be fantastic. If you really wouldn't mind, I would love that. That'd be great.
Sure. So starting off with the double cask, we're looking at $59.99 retail. I'm just going to go up in price. I know we haven't gotten to the 10 yet, but that comes in at $69.99. The 15 is $79.99. Victoria $89.99, and the 18, which we're trying right now, is coming in about $129.99.
That's not bad.
Not at all. Not for what this delivers.
No, I know. That's what I'm saying. I'm like, this is $130. I would spend $130 on this 18-year-old Scotch. I'm very picky.
Yeah.
I don't like to spend over $100 for a bottle if I can avoid it, unless it's something that really delivers a lot of flavor.
Yeah.
and this
So I think,
delivers a lot of
so,
flavor.
so I think one of the key things to touch on for the 18-year-old is that it's spent 17 of its 18 years in bourbon, but that final year is spent in first fill Oloroso sherry.
Yeah.
So it's had that
I
second.
definitely get that raisin.
Yes.
You know, I'm glad you said Oloroso. Be that kind of puts a point for it on me. You know, there is that little bit power of suggestion, of course, but now that you said the Oloroso,
Yeah.
as I had some on my palate, in my mouth, as I was tasting it, I can kind of, pinpoint and focus, and I do understand. I do see that, that raisiny kind of creamy Oloroso sherry. T Squared said he grabbed a Crofton Gia over the weekend. Crofton Gia over the weekend, unique and challenging, and the SMWS 112.55 Inchmirren was amazing.
Yeah, well, there's too much to dive into even in those first two sentences for this one. The Loch Lomond one, yeah. I mean, we can get into all levels of detail when we get into that one.
I mean, Forbes and I can go over Loch Lomond when we talk in a couple of weeks, because I know, Gary, you just managed Glen Scotia, right?
Yeah, no. Listen, I've worked on, like I said, I've been with the company for 6 years, so I mean, I'm based at Loch Lomond Distillery. So yeah, listen, if you'll have me, I'd love to join you for Loch Lomond because I love talking about that. It's just such. I mean, I love everything about Glen Scotia. But I think the thing I love about the Loch Lomond group is that the two working distilleries we've got are so different. They're almost incomparable. Where you've got just that wonderful craft postcard distillery at Campbelltown, down in that small region, 1 of 3, and then you've got the just magnificent behemoth that is Loch Lomond. I think the best description I've heard of that distillery is essentially Willy Wonka's factory of whiskey.
So we actually have a Willy Wonka's whiskey factory or booze factory here in LA. I don't know if you've ever heard of it. It's called Lost Spirits Distillery, and they make American peated malt and rum, and even a brandy.
Well, again, we'll go into it more on Loch Lomond, but if you think of the fact that through Glen Scotia, and if you consider we do unpeated, heavily peated, and medium peated, and that's probably fairly standard spirit levels for most distilleries. So that's 3 different spirit types out of one distillery. Out of Loch Lomond, we can do 9 malt distillates. So that's 9 spirit types before you even think we get into casks.
Wow.
And also we do grain. So I mean, that's just bonkers, like next level bonkers.
But listen, guys, I'll sorry, Gary. I'm just going to say I'll leave you to it, guys. Okay, and thank you very much for having
Ian,
me.
thank you for joining us. It's been a pleasure to have you. Sláinte, sir.
My pleasure. Okay, thank you, and
thanks, Ian.
Enjoy the rest of your night, guys. Okay.
You too, Ian. Thanks for joining. Good to see you.
Bye, guys. Bye, Gary. Bye, folks. Bye, Sam. Bye.
Good night.
Yeah, Sam, I can bring graphs and all sorts when we're into Loch Lomond. It's
oh please. I mean, don't talk to me though. Talk to Forbes because I feel bad a little bit because Forbes is just sitting there all stoic. Like, when do I get to talk? Is it my turn? I want to talk. I want to get nerdy.
No, I'm happy to have Gary here. I mean, I'm used to over here in the U.S. Carrying my own weight, so it's nice to have some reinforcements from Scotland. I haven't seen Gary in person now for 2 years, so it's we're having to rely on the virtual.
Well, the beauty of virtual is that I've never even met Gary in person or Ian, but here they both were rattling on and listening to me rattle on about Scotch whiskey.
Well, Sam, I saw you during, I think, one of my final trips before the COVID outbreak was, late February.
Yep.
So
late February, I remember that.
That was the last time I was out in California. But Real quickly though, I know you had mentioned earlier, real quickly about the Loch Lomond blend. I said, we're not doing any blends through Loch Lomond, but we do have a blend that we're doing, and it's actually named after Gary, and it's called Glen Gary. So
Yeah.
I think, as I mentioned, that's the one blended Scotch we have now available in the U.S. and out in California. It's fair new to the U.S., but it is in all the Trader Joe's now out in California. So if you're looking for a great blend,
Cracking blend.
look no further than Trader Joe's with Glen Gary.
I meant to get that bottle for today, but I really forgot. We'll
do it with Loch Lomond because it's made at the Loch Lomond distillery. I just wanted to follow up because you asked about whether or not we were doing any blends in the U.S., and that's the only one we're doing.
What is the price point coming at Glengarry and Forbes for the blend?
Sorry?
What is the price point coming at for the Glengarry?
I think actually Trader Joe's has one of the best prices in the country. I think it's coming in around $11.99 or $12.99 on the shelf, which is just crazy, but it's competing against a lot of these other great blends that have all of this liter inventory that they haven't been able to sell because it's all usually goes all into bars and restaurants. So they have all this liter inventory, and they're able to basically come in and really get aggressive with their pricing. So we needed to have a more aggressive price on our 750 than some of these other guys do on their liters. But anyway, it's some great opportunities on a great blends right now with the Trader Joe's.
Yeah.
So, God, $11.99. I'm still just speechless about that.
Yep.
The beauty of this 18. We're just getting into it. Like we were talking about, there's that Oloroso in there, but it's not quite a peat smoke, but there is when you're sitting around a fire and you put out the smoke, or you just put out the wood, for the first time, kind of how that smoke and that steam it smells so good. That kind of you know what I'm saying, right?
No, absolutely,
yeah.
And it's not oppressive to any other flavors. It's not. Again, like I said, it works. It's there almost as a background note, and it works with everything else. It
just brings everything forward. It brings everything together. Not forward, actually. It really ties the flavors together. Because you get those malty notes and bready notes, and then over here you have those raisiny, creamy, sweet sherry notes. And in the middle is that smoke that kind of bridges the two.
One of my favorite things about the 18 is that we're in the 15, the fruity note from that long fermentation kind of starts off orange on the nose through into apricot. It does this does that wonderful thing as fruity notes do, and with older whiskies, it goes into that tropical realm. And it's almost, for me, it's like overripe pineapple. When pineapple's just on that almost just too soft stage, almost into that, whether borders that kind of papaya guava kind of territory.
The beauty of whiskey is that there are no wrong answers.
Correct.
I don't see that pineapple, but if you do, then that's correct.
No, absolutely, mate, and that's it. I will always tell people that official tasting notes for me are there as a guide. I can't tell you what your palate's going to pick up.
I ignore tasting notes unless they come from me or someone like, the Whiskey Crusaders or Joe Van Name, whose palates I know and I trust. If I don't care who you are. You can be, Jim Murray or, whoever's running Whiskey Advocate. I don't give a shit about your tasting notes. I'll be honest. I do not give a shit.
I think you touched on a very key point there, Sam. It's finding somebody that has like you said, a palate that you trust. But a lot of times, and you'll find it even within whiskey groups, and it's weird. I still find myself doing it in online whiskey groups. You gravitate to people that you ultimately find out have a very similar palate to you.
Absolutely.
And as you go through and you're chatting to them online, you go, "Oh, I really like this whiskey," and they go, "Oh yeah, that's one of my top 10s." And you go, "Oh yeah, and I really like this whiskey," and they go, "Oh yeah, I just bought a bottle of that." I don't know how it works. It must be a kind of subconscious thing, but yeah, you just gravitate to like-minded people, I suppose.
Couple of questions coming up. Whiskey
Okay.
Crusaders are asking, Forbes, where in Texas are you located?
I'm in Dallas.
Brilliant. And then Keith Squared is asking, sorry, Forbes, go ahead.
I was going to say, what's your sort code, Forbes? You want to just let everybody?
I'm sorry?
That's fine.
I'm in Dallas now. I've also lived in Austin and Houston, so I've made the rounds. But I've been in Dallas for 15 years now.
And then T Squared is asking about the Glengarry 12. He sees it on the website, but not in any inventory in the U.S. Will it be coming over here?
It's here. It depends on which market. We're in about 12 or 13, I think 13 states right now. So it's in Texas. It's in Florida. It's going to be kicking off in New York next month. It's in New Jersey. So I don't know T Squared where you are, but if you let me know, I can hopefully point you in the right direction with that.
Is it in California yet?
Not the 12. No, only the blend is in California at Trader Joe's. But I think at some point maybe. But there just isn't there's not a lot of inventory on the 12.
And then Tracy asked what barley varietal is used in, sorry, wrong question. I mean, yes, neither of us is Jim Murray. But Tracy asked what barley type is used at Glen Scotia.
Concerto predominantly for us. So we source all of our malted barley from the northeast of Scotland. So we buy that in the northeast. It's one of these things where I think being a west coast of Scotland distillery, local barley tells a wonderful story, but in the practical side of things, it doesn't really stack up for us. The west coast of Scotland is ultimately too wet for growing barley. You need to get the best yield out of barley, you need dry conditions, and that is not the west coast of Scotland.
Forbes, the comments are asking Virginia, Maryland, and DC. Where can they find it?
Schneider's in DC.
There you go, Schneider's in DC. And they're also asking what store near Fort Worth carries it.
Goody carries
There you go, Matt. Goody.
Goody.
Sam, can we do this guy next, please?
I'm already moved on. I'm ahead of you. I'm already on the 25.
Excellent.
Catch up, Gary. God. Forbes, can you believe this guy? He's so slow.
Unbelievable.
Listen, it's very rare that I'm told that I'm slow drinking whiskey.
Joe said like he wants to go to Capitol Hill this week. No, Joe, we don't blame you at all.
I hear the streets will be very quiet though. It's fine.
Your lips to his ears.
Yeah.
So 25.
This is like buttered popcorn.
That ultimately for this, do you know what I mean? It's 25 years in bourbons. It's just a magnificent Glen Scotia single malt.
Yeah.
And I
Buttered
think
popcorn.
Again, Gary, to your point, one of only 10 scotches to ever win a platinum medal in San Francisco. So I think that it puts it in certainly in a very exclusive league of its own, with only 9 other scotches that have ever earned a platinum.
And I think if we almost take a step back to 18, personally for me, when you're looking at Scotches, 12 up to 15 for me is that absolute butter range for finding the best balance between a distillery character and the wood influence. And a lot of the times that I tend to find as you go 16 up to 18 and then beyond, the wood really starts to come in and dominate more. And the wood tends to drive a lot of the flavour, obviously, because it's been in that wood for longer. And I think for the 18 and the Glen Scotia, that refill bourbon and the first fill Oloroso obviously smooths that out beautifully. But this, for me, I get the bourbon notes, but it's not a real dominating woody flavour. It is, like said Sam, it's that butter popcorn. It's just wonderfully soft, salted, chewy caramel for me as well. I'm just going to be quiet for a wee bit.
Forbes, any comments on it? Do you have a bottle in front of you?
I don't. So that's the one I'm missing right now because there's none available in Texas right now. So
well, we got to fix that. I'll mail you some.
Oh.
I had a few bottles, but I gave them away very, reluctantly.
You're a good Forbes.
I'm very upset that I did.
Just make sure to lord it over their heads next time you see them. Like, oh yeah, you remember that bottle of 25-year-old Scotch I gave you?
Right, that's right. So luckily, I know there's plenty of other ones I have, here to.
To be fair, if I gave somebody a bottle of 25, that would be my opening line every time I spoke to them.
Yeah.
Oh, hello, my friend that I gifted a bottle of Glen Scotia 25 to. How are you?
Hello, my friend who owes me their life for a bottle of 25-year-old Scotch that blew their fucking mind.
Yeah.
Oh, has it been long since we discussed that I gave you a bottle of Glen Scotia 25? Oh no, just a couple of minutes. Okay, excellent. Moving on.
So we're on the same page. You do remember that I gave you a bottle of Glen Scotia 25.
I'll remind them.
I think I almost made Gary die.
But again, so the other thing we need to touch on in this is that this is at 48.8. This isn't nearly 49.
Yeah.
That does not drink like that at all, Sam.
It drinks close to 100 proof.
If you gave that to me blind and told me that was 80 proof, I would be like, yeah, okay, fine.
It's just.
I would not agree with you. I would not believe you, actually. Because I find this drinks a little higher than it does lower, honestly. I find that it drinks closer to 100 proof, 101, 102. This does not drink like an 80 proof to me.
Fair.
Glen Scotia 11-year sherry double cask in glass right now from Tracy.
Tracy's got that one.
Oh, that's the one you were teasing me with.
Yeah. So I mean, Tracy's brought it up, so I kind of need to show you. So unfortunately, we didn't have this one in the States this year.
Yeah, she must have smuggled that one in.
Yeah, due to a number of things, including the tariffs being a kind of big thing. So as we'll come on to, we've obviously done our limited edition releases for the Campbelltown Malts Festival. And this year, 2020 was our first year that we then did a seasonal release towards the end of the year. And that we're hoping will then grow into a similar series as the Malts Festival. So look out for that 2021. Hopefully hitting the market September into October.
Don't forget you promised me a bottle.
Oh no, absolutely. Forbes, we need to get Sam a bottle of this.
Yes.
Now you can get 70 sales in it. That's fine. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's
going to definitely, I think, help us having 700 mLs available now because a lot of these, some of these SKUs that we don't have Glen Scotia in the past, we maybe would have had to commit to a bigger number or so forth to make the 750 available. So now,
absolutely, it's
going to really, I think, help us. And that was actually, I got an email from customer services today, asking about that, and it's certainly going to enable us to have a lot more availability with some of these SKUs that we don't have yet in the U.S., but we'll be able to just because now it'll already be bottled, in a 700 ml, and it'll be much easier. And so I think it's going to definitely help us have a much broader availability.
That said, though, some people are concerned myself included, that what we're going to get is the shaft here in the States. We're all used to 75 CL, 750 ml bottlings, and we're worried that we're going to get the same price or even higher prices for less whiskey.
I don't think it'll work out that way, Sam. I think if you think about it from the flip side, and I kind of touched on it early on, where for most Scotch producers, the vast majority of the liquid goes into 70 CLs, and then you've got two key markets that take 75s, being the US and South Africa. So you're going to have a smaller proportion of that glass having to get made as 75s, which will incur increased costs. But if you're going to then be into that vast, bigger production of the 70 CLs, you will get those economies of scale. And certainly, if, like I said, if I get into with it, I think that there's going to be that pass through of getting that at the equivalent price to the 70 CL versus the 75. I don't think you can just. I really would hope that most Scotch producers would do the same, and at least bring that down by the equivalent percentage.
You know, Renita makes a really good point. She said prices will always go up, but they're more excited for getting bottles and opportunities to get whiskey that we haven't been able to get here before.
Yeah, that's
and Joe said the same thing. Greater selection, but the shaft on prices.
The market, unfortunately, we can't control what the market does, and I think that's right. That's the right way for it to be. And Scotch is in growth. And it's, I think you guys are super lucky in that you've got a great US whiskey market that is just going great guns. But you're also hopefully then going to get, with this change, more and more Scotch coming through the door. You've got more and more Irish whiskey coming through the door. World whiskey's going just crazy. It can only hopefully be a good time for everyone. But yeah, unfortunately, the market will. The wonderful world of capitalism, the market will do what the market will do.
Forbes, what was the price on the 25 again?
I think it's, we're looking probably, it's going to probably be close to somewhere between $449 and $479.
That's more than I can afford. Damn.
Well, again, there might be some changes, hopefully, with with the new administration. We'll see.
Yeah, no, this is just some fantastic Scotch, and I would love to keep some around because this is not going to last particularly long.
Yeah, it's got the unique problem of being too easy to drink for a 25-year-old. I think. Look,
I've had my share of 25-year-old Scotches, and a few slightly older. The interesting thing for me actually on this bottle is that it says bottled in 2017. So it's probably a couple, it's a little older of a bottling now. Gary, the bottle you have, when was it bottled?
Yeah, so we made a specific. Let me just check that one. I think we took the specific bottling date off of that. Yeah. So mine's not got that on it. I'm totally honest. I don't know why we put it on the first one.
So is it the same proof then? This is at 48.8.
Yeah.
48.8 consistent across the board. And I think it's probably like I said, we've only the takeover happened 5-6 years ago, and we've been learning more as we go through with some releases. Victoriana being a very key one. So obviously with you having that 51.5, Sam, we've after that decided that we would go into batch production. Well, it's always been batch production, but then we decided we would label the batches. So we then, from the 51.5, did a batch at 54.8. And then it struck us that when we thought about moving into batch 2, when you think purely with the US and the TTB and how that can just snarl absolutely everything up, and then you multiply that out by, I think we are in currently 120 markets. You start to go, is that batching and that relabeling every single time going to be the best use of everybody's time and money. So the decision we ultimately came to with Victoriana was, let's find the absolute highest strength that we can commit to making that on an ongoing process. And that was the 54.2, and that's when we just decided, right, so rather than batches, let's call it cask strength 54.2.
1 second.
Yeah, Sam, as you're probably aware, it's really just the U.S. and South Africa, and maybe, I don't know if Gary but there might be one other country that does the 750 mLs.
Yeah.
So the rest of the world all does 700. So it's certainly going to open up, I think, a lot of doors for us. With we'll see a lot more availability.
Absolutely, and for the most part, the general consumer base doesn't know and won't care that their bottles are 700 versus 750 ml.
Right.
All they'll see is, oh, my bottle's slightly cheaper. Okay, cool.
Well,
some might notice that, oh, well, I'm getting less, but...
And hopefully with that switch to 70 CL, and as Forbes said, hopefully they're dropping us some tariffs, you'll see a double done of that.
Right.
Yes, I really hope the tariffs get dropped soon. That wasn't even against the whiskey industry. It was against it was
aviation.
Somehow retaliation for aviation.
Yeah. It's absurd, but
it is, and it's affecting people's livelihoods, literally.
Yeah.
I mean, Forbes, since the tariffs came in, how much harder has it been for you to place Loch, Lomond, and Glen Scotia?
Well, I mean, it's been challenging. I mean, but luckily our old importer kind of got ahead of it a little bit and was able to bring in some additional inventory, knowing that the tariffs was a possibility of it.
Yeah.
But we're and there was some talk back before Christmas that they may go away, and there was going to maybe be some sort of mini trade deal going on with the UK, because the biggest thing is this is an EU tariff due to Airbus. And the UK is no longer part of the EU as of December 31st. So certainly it makes no longer have a EU-based tariff on a country that's no longer part of the EU. So we're certainly hoping, and you may know also that the UK dropped all of their retaliatory tariffs against the US a few weeks ago, and hope that
I didn't realize that. That means there's no longer tariff on bourbon and rye.
Right. Exactly. So it certainly seems crazy for us to have ours still, in place when the UK dropped all of theirs. And I think, it sounds like Biden his first visit is going to be, heading over to the UK. So I think that, hopefully that we can sort this out here shortly, because it's not good for certainly for our industry. And, you probably know that I think 2 days before the end of the year, we imposed tariffs on cognac. And other things. So, I mean, but I think the Scotch will be the first one to be rescinded, which I'm very hopeful for.
But a very prominent retailer here, K&L, does a lot of single casks. They've been bottling them as blended malt. They've been teaspooning them to get around that, tariff.
Yeah, I mean that's one thing. I mean, there are ways that people, I guess, can do that. I mean, whether or not it's worth playing with potential fines and so forth, I don't know. I mean, I just know that we're certainly abiding by them and doing everything that we regret having to do, but we're just hoping that they go away soon.
Absolutely. Gentlemen, we are starting to run closer to 2 hours.
Yep.
First of all, let me just say thank you both again for joining, and thank you, Ian, for joining. Thank you everyone in the comments: T Squared, Tracy, Joe Van Name, Renita, Matt, Whiskey Crusaders. It's been great to have everyone here in the comments, and thank you to everyone who's tuned in. My channel is still growing, so to have 11, 10 viewers consistently throughout the entire show so far, when it's just, us rattling and raving and bantering and badgering about Scotch whiskey, it's fantastic that people want to hear us, talk the shit about Scotch. So let's move on. Pardon, Forbes?
I said it's a great category. I think there's more. It's probably the as far as information and education goes, it's never ending. I mean, you can never know everything about Scotch, as you can attest with your book. I mean, it's not it's in a different category than some of the other spirits. You can distill today and tomorrow.
You know what? Since you mentioned the book, I've been I've put up a couple of banners throughout the show. But if you're interested in getting a copy of the Beginner's Guide to Whiskey, the link is going on the screen right now. It will also be in the description after the stream is over. And you can see the book next to the bottle of 18-year.
Great.
So, shall we move on, gentlemen, to the 10-year now?
To the peated side.
I already had to jump ahead since I didn't have any 25, so I'm already.
Well, la-di-da, Forbes.
Yep.
Look at you, ahead of the class.
I am a little bit, cheated a little bit.
I actually had a teacher in grade school.
Sam, I can't believe you just la-di-da'd him for not having 25-year-old Scotch. Feels a bit harsh.
I mean, don't forget, he also can lord it over his friends' heads. You remember that 25-year-old Glen Scotia I gave you?
Yeah. I definitely have some favors owed to me.
Yeah. I actually had a teacher in grade school get mad at me, and it got me in trouble because I was reading ahead. They were going way too slow, but I was 4, 5, 6, 7 pages ahead of them, and I got in trouble for it.
Yeah. I think that's, yeah. Don't even get me started on education systems, Sam.
T. Squared said he loves learning about those smaller distilleries doing damn good work that we love. T, I think you mean dram good work. Sorry, I couldn't resist, but I'll be here all night for the next 10 or so minutes. Oh, so, wow.
10-year-old, fully peated. I don't actually, off the top of my head, know the peat level on this. Forbes, do you know the peat level on that one? Is it a medium peat?
40? 50? I mean,
40 ppm?
That sound about right, Gary? I know whatever. I'm trying to think what. I asked Ian one.
Yeah, I know it's certainly our kind of heavy peat tends to be between 40 and 50 ppm. Medium peat tends to be 20 to 25. Certainly kind of. I'm probably leaning more towards the medium. So it's a 46%, still non-chill filter, natural colour. You obviously get more of the peat on the nose.
The color glass is like hay.
Yeah.
Yes.
It's such a light honey, not even honey gold. Like if you took honey and heavily diluted it with like water or something.
Do you know the hay note is something that sticks with me through this drum? It's like when I get onto the palate, and it sounds weird in terms of saying it. In a very pleasant way, it's got a lovely kind of almost burnt hay note to it.
David asked, is it 100% peated malt, or is only a percentage of the malt peated?
I don't know that, David. Ian would probably be the best man to answer that question.
It wouldn't be it would not be 100%. It's a certain percentage. It's a lower percentage. I don't know.
Yeah, no. I think what David means. So if we go heavily peated, then it would be all of the malt would be peated. But then when we come into a medium peat, that is a mix between our heavily peated malt, and we then mix in some unpeated malt with that as well. So that's how we get to our medium peat. Well, essentially we split it 50-50 to bring it down 50%.
Yeah, I don't even. Octomore, in my opinion, is probably the peatiest of anything and I don't even think that's anywhere close to 100% peated as far as.
No, there's, and I think that's the thing that's if you rewind 10 years ago, 10, 15 years ago, like 50 ppm was blowing people's minds as a peat level. Folk were like, no, you what 50 ppm? That's mad. But now that is just, personally, I would say that's probably industry standard as a if you're putting out what you would call a peated malt. You would want that to be around 50 ppm when you start. Anything below that, you then start to get into medium and light.
Gotcha.
But then Octomore, and like you said, these kind of real big peat heads have had to then kick that up another notch. And part of my whiskey journey, that's beyond the wit of me for the moment.
I remember a couple of years back, Octomore released what they claimed was the most peaty Scotch in the world, and they were using a proprietary method of measuring the ppm, and they got in a wee bit of trouble for that.
Yeah. Yeah, the SWA tend to clamp down fairly quick and fairly hard on some claims.
Yeah, Sam, I think that was just over 300 ppm, right?
I don't remember exactly, but if it's over 300 ppm, I don't know how anyone can taste anything but peat in that.
Right.
Yeah.
That's like making peated whiskey for peated whiskey's sake. It's that at that point, you might as well just eat a peat brick.
Exactly.
Yeah, and I think that's again, as much as I keep harking back to this 10 for me, absolutely opens on the peat, but as you give it time on the palate, you start to get more of that core Glen Scotia comes through, that saltiness comes through, probably more towards the tail end. But before that, you get that wonderful vanilla toffee come through. There's still the peat still plays on the palate and across the tongue from there, absolutely. But again, it's that waves of flavour and that wonderful balance of everything across the board. It's I would say I'm genuinely, I wouldn't consider myself a massive peat fan, but yeah, I can quite comfortably make a big dent in that bottle of it.
I found recently my palate has shifted slightly away from peated Scotch. It doesn't dislike it, but it shifted slightly more towards fruitier, more, quote unquote, Speyside or Highland Scotch whiskeys, moving away from that more Islay style. I found that, I get a lot of Mezcal Pechuga on a lot of the peated Scotches right now recently. But this one, I still get some of that, kind of Pechuga Mezcal, which for those of you watching don't know what Pechuga is. They distill Mezcal, which is, agave distillate, not always Espadín. Sometimes it's Resilia, sometimes it's Sotol. All tequila is Mezcal, not all Mezcal is tequila. So they redistill this Mezcal with raw chicken breast in the still, hanging inside of the still. So it gets some of that meaty quality, inside, like literal poultry meat flavors, kind of, it's a different kind of meaty quality into the spirit. It's kind of like distilling a gin with gin it's kind of like, a gin basket, but, you have raw chicken hanging inside of the still instead.
Yeah. And I think one of those things, like you said, I think we find a lot of people are moving, not a lot, you'll find a significant number of people are moving more away from peat. And I think, again, that there was a time where peat was that way, and it's why Islay's so successful, because it was so different from every other region. And that real big, clear USP that was peat, and they could build on that. So each of the distilleries could bring their own element to that. And then I think, we've been doing long, as Ian mentioned, we've been doing long, slow fermentations for 6-7 years now, if not beyond that. But you tend to find over the last, I would say, 18 months into 2 years, you're finding more and more distilleries are talking about longer fermentations of that kind of 90 hours and above. to really bring out that fruity flavour. And again, I think it's all about creating that point of difference versus your competitors. There are so many of them there. They need to do something different.
So I'm going to move on to the Campbellton Malt Festival 2020, the Tawny Port finish. Oh, so tell me you don't have this one either.
It's all for you, Sam.
I've still got.
If it makes you feel better, I know the feeling of God. I want to drink that, but I don't have any here. It's not available here.
Forbes, if it makes you feel any better, this is an empty carton.
Okay. I mean, I had some. I just don't have it anymore. I mean, it's been a long 10 months, Gary.
Literally, that's all I've got left.
Yeah. All right.
This breaks my heart how little I've got left of this.
Well, Gary, we can maybe fix that.
Yeah.
That being said, I am delighted to pour some of this. So, from a Campbelltown
Holy shit! What the fuck?
Sam, is this the first time you've tried this?
I had a wee nip earlier.
So, to give everybody a bit of kind of background as Sam gets a wee bit emotional. From a
Excited, you mean?
From a Campbelltown Malt's point of view, the festival itself has been going for probably about 10 years. I say probably 10 years. 2020 would have been the festival's 10th year. But for those first 4 years, because Glen Scotia was essentially a sleeping giant, we didn't do anything at the distillery. We didn't have a shop. We didn't really have an established visitor centre. If you wanted a tour, you basically had to come and just knock on Ian's door and ask for a tour. And Ian would do it. Do you know what I mean? Ian, being the gentleman that he is, would stop whatever he was doing, would take you on a tour. So for the first 4 years, the Campbelltown Malts Festival would be held at Springbank, and Ian would go down, take a table, put the whiskies on the table, and pour from there. But as of 2016, we opened our visitor centre. We were able to welcome more and more people through the distillery, and that meant that we were doing our own stuff. So year one, we launched a festival single cask bottling. Went wonderful. That sold out really quickly, as you would expect it would do. Year two, again, sold out even quicker, and the questions started coming in from the markets. Why am I not getting any of this? Well, it's got a single cask malt, 250 bottles, and we sold it out in a week. So the clear decision was made, and with the Campbelltown Malts Festival being that one real big pinnacle event, the lightning rod for Campbelltown, if you like, that we wanted to be able to involve as many people across the world in part of that celebration of Campbelltown. So we decided to try and do a limited edition piece. So the very first one we did in 2018, Ruby Port, went down really well. So again, like I said, cask strength, natural colour, non-chill filtered, and it was all. For me, it's all about using casks that would have been available through Campbelltown that help tell that Campbelltown story. So ports and sherries and rums and all the wonderful stuff. And ultimately, it's brought us to the Tawny Port being our third iteration of that release. So it's a 14-year-old finished at peated spirit, finished in Tawny Port, and it's just
Gary, can you do a PPM on this?
I couldn't tell you that exactly, and I'll kind of take you through that for later. So, in terms of the breakdown of the distillate, so 45% of the spirit is from 2004 and is heavily peated, so probably about 50 ppm. There are 30% from 2005 that's heavily peated, and then the final 25% of that is from 2006 and is medium peated, so that's probably between 20-25%. So wow. I mean, a push, I would say it was probably a medium peat.
The peat on this is just so mellow.
It's balanced for me, Sam. it's just, and this is where the absolute dark arts and black magic of the master blender comes into play. The things that Michael Henry can do with casks and spirit styles, I genuinely could read all the books and spend all the time talking to people, and I genuinely don't think I would ever understand it. Michael has a wonderful way of finding the right casks to go with the right spirit, and using through his team and monitoring that spirit, knows the exact time to pull that out where it just brings the best balance of that Glen Scotia characteristic and the Glen Scotia distillate style, but also balanced with the Campbelltown style and that finishing cask. So it's just a wonderful combo. So this one's been in first fill Tony Port for between 6 to 8 months. And for me, just the balance of the fruits and the port and the peat, phenomenal. And there's a lot of the guys, a lot of the kind of whiskey geeks over here are raving about this. I know one guy who bought a case of this as soon as it was released, and it's
Wow.
bawling his eyes out because he's on to his last.
This is good. Although I got to admit, it's not as good as I'd hoped. I might have hyped it up in my head a little too much because I'm expecting much more fruity, powerful, sweet port. Instead, it's very minty, actually, and very cool. Like fresh mint.
And I think it's, but that for me is one of the, it's always one of the dangers of doing a finish, Sam, is that, and especially when it comes down to a port and a sherry, is that the automatic assumption is normally something that's going to be a big sherry bomb, or it's going to be really port led. But as I've said, for me, a Glen Scotia finished whiskey is all about striking the balance. I never
Exactly. I'm not saying it's not good. It's very good.
No. But that's
just,
what's happening. I think it's all
my
about the expectation in your head that is such a big thing to it. And I would be super interested to hear what your thoughts are on this. See if you come back to this tomorrow and that's your opening dram. I'd love to hear what you think on that. Like coming back to a day after.
I will. When I mentioned I had a wee nip earlier, I did have just a wee nip of this before the show, about an hour before the show. But gentlemen, let me just once again say thank you so much for joining me today. It was a pleasure, Forbes, having you, and a pleasure having you, Gary, join me for the chat. It was an honor to have Ian on with us for just, the short bit that he did. Even if he would have just popped in and said hello for a few moments, even that would have been like, oh. But, the fact that he stayed with us for close to 45 minutes, if not an hour, was just really, really exciting, and I was really happy to have him. Forbes, I look forward to talking with you guys, you and Gary both again, for Loch Lomond.
Yes.
In just a couple of weeks, hopefully. We have yet to nail down an exact date, but all you guys will know when we do. Don't forget to tune in next week. It will be back to our regular time of 4 p.m. We did this time a little special just because, we did have Gary tuning in from Scotland, and we didn't want to make him get up at, 12:30 in the morning to come and chat with us.
Which is about what time it is right now there, huh?
Yeah.
After midnight.
That's fine. Not a problem for me, gentlemen.
Good.
And Sam, thank you very much for having me. Been a genuine honour to join you and Forbes on this one.
Good seeing you again, Gary.
If you'll have me on
the live again next Tuesday at 4 p.m. Pacific with Gareth Howells, the national brand ambassador for Bacardi's single malt Scotch whiskey portfolio. Going over Aberfeldy and Craigellachie. Gentlemen, Sláinte. There are good ships and there are wood ships, and there are ships that sail the sea, but the best ships are friendships, and may they always be. Closing out this wonderful 2-hour 7 whiskey live stream with what may be one of my new favorites, the Glen Scotia 18-year. Ladies and gentlemen, thanks again for tuning in. I love the comments. I love having you guys interacting with us. I'm sure Forbes and Gary appreciated all the questions.
Yep.
Gentlemen, you two don't go anywhere. Everyone else, see you next week.
All right.
Cheers.
Thanks, guys.